I am employed with the Supreme Qualification Committee. I'm ad interim chairperson. Now, as opposed to Hovhannes and Arevik, I have a complete. I underwent through a completely different process. First, I was appointed an official in a public office, and then I started to develop interest for education, or in this case, the higher qualification committee and the tertiary education. And this office assumed certain functions, but you always want to propose something new, and this leads you to do some research. There were several books and articles that were born as a result, which essentially come to augment your office as a civil servant. Ending up in this Supreme Qualification Committee, we commenced a wave of change 3 years ago. Everything depended on the following. The system, being the Soviet legacy, had very clear, now they call it corruption. It contained an element of corruption because the procedures, norms, and regulations that were and still are mostly in effect there lack clarity. They provide leeway for an official to, within a certain time frame, in his or somebody else's interest, to interpret it to their convenience, and such interpretation will yield certain results to the benefit of this or that individual or entity. So the first step we thought of and tried to implement was to introduce certain clarity. We drafted several government resolutions and proposed to have them enacted. We partially succeeded. For example, who in Armenia has the right to acquire an academic degree? In Western countries, that would be a ludicrous question. It would be very difficult to find any governmental standard there. Every university has its own clearly defined ethical norms and standards, but since our system was Soviet legacy, everything you could have cheated, plagiarized, tweaked, changed things, which is why we need to have it enshrined. So what publications you must have in order to aspire for a degree? In the past, it was like you had to have had 3 articles published. But what should these articles be about? Where should they be published? Was moot. There was, of course, a list, an inventory of periodicals, academic periodicals, where you could have those 3 articles published to acquire a degree. But whether this would, if you were also thinking about a second degree, things became more obscure. So now one of these 3 at least has it has to be a peer-reviewed publication or database, web of knowledge, web of science, where your publication must be included. And we clarified certain nuances pertaining to the degrees themselves. Dear friends, but there is always this restriction that we still feel. One such restriction was that Armenia, in the meantime, also pursued certain economic cooperation dimensions. Until 2013, the bearing was clearly towards Europe. The government program clearly stated that The system of granting degrees in academic degrees in Armenia should approximate with the Western system. When in the 1913 the bearings changed, we faced another dilemma. All those countries in the EU do have supreme qualification commissions, and they want to adopt common rules and norms. Another impediment still existing is the lack of vision in Armenia. There is no vision. It's not clear where we're headed. No document that would at least indicate a course bearing which way should we go to increase efficiency, increase the number of scholars, to have them comply with the demand in the market. Nothing of the kind. And this makes it very difficult to pursue change. Ziranush asked a question about science that should also somehow steer reform in the education. Tertiary university degree is exactly this junction. In order to change science, we have to reflect on the tertiary higher education, which until this point has not existed by law. There is a law on higher education and postgrad education where there are only two levels, primary and secondary, and the third one, postgrad, is not there. Here, under the current law, it's considered to be not tertiary but post-university, which is an obscure term. So this is where science and education have to meet, and I welcome our recent idea by the deputy minister. He said maybe we should put in circulation a new draft of the law on higher education. Uh, does Armenia need 2 tiers of education or not? This confusion, everybody realizes what's the difference between the candidate and doctor of sciences. The confusion results in the fact that the second tier is called a doctor here, whereas throughout the rest of the Western society, a doctor is the highest degree in university education, which is at the same time the first academic degree. Which is why in our most recent publication, this is called From Postgrad to Doctorate, which spells out what changes need to be put in place, especially in the tertiary level, in order for the Soviet legacy of aspirantura to be replaced by doctorate, which is completely palatable for the Western world. And the third tertiary degree, I profoundly believe, needs to be preserved. It will be an additional stimulus and motivation, incentive for scientists to maintain a level or to go ahead with their research. A similar system exists in Western European countries. And the most important question they keep asking, does Armenia need the Supreme Qualification Committee or not? There are two concepts and opinions here. There are people who got their academic degrees under the old Soviet or Russian system. For them, there's no question the system needs to stay. Those who got their education in the West, they just fail to understand a governmental body that endorses or approves university issued diplomas. These are two, at first sight, contradictory approaches, but they're also complementary, these two systems. In the first case, if we take Soviet legacy system, which is what we have in effect in Armenia, this Supreme Qualification Committee, which was a public entity, they oversee the output end of the system. The course, for example, now you can be an aspirant where the entry is not overseen. You can sit down in your cozy home, have an academic mentor, do all the work, write up the dissertation, submitted it for defense, and here's where the Supreme Qualification Commission enters to check whether it complies with the standards or not. And let's so if you don't oversight the input, it makes sense to check the output to maintain a certain standard. The opposing opinion is that you should oversee the input on the course, which is more of a Western model, where the entry is very difficult and cumbersome. You must have certain skills, research skills, and especially the course. In Western Europe, it's very difficult. If you enter a doctorate, it would be very difficult if you don't complete it and defend your thesis. You have to submit reports semi-annually or annually. So whether willingly or not, you go through every motion to satisfy the requirements. Eventually, it no longer makes sense to control the output. End of the process. That's it in a nutshell.